Rockstar Games have given us some of the most evil and ruthless antagonists since the early games of their catalog. Now, not every Rockstar game has a particularly notable antagonist, but in today's video I just wanted to focus on the ones that most people consider to be interesting. So first things first, let's start with Officer Tenpenny. Officer Tenpenny is one of the main antagonists of GTA San Andreas, and he is a corrupt police officer and is very violent, sadistic, callous, and manipulative. He is also quite arrogant and can easily be angered if things do not go his way. He is also a sociopath and seems to be fond of practicing brutality on others. He possesses a superiority complex in which he expresses enjoyment in manipulating others and being in charge of those around him. Tenpenny particularly enjoys controlling CJ, and even likes to refer to CJ as his dog. Throughout the game, he constantly harasses him and blackmails him to do his own dirty work and to cover up his crimes. Anyone who's played GTA San Andreas knows that this guy sucked and is definitely a contender for one of the greatest Rockstar antagonists. So next on the list is an antagonist that's a little more tame than the others on this list, and that's Gary Smith from Bully. Now, Gary has a very bad reputation among the other students and even staff in the school, and is often described as a sociopath that likes to torture people. Gary suffers from ADD and also shows traits of narcissism and paranoia. He was put on behavior medication but stops taking it sometime around Halloween, which is what leads to his betrayal of Jimmy and Pete. Despite being mentally unstable, he is, however, observant. He also thinks that friends are for the weak, seeing most people as tools to be used or enemies to be crushed. Even though he tends to still call people friend, regardless of whether he's being friendly towards them or hostile. Gary proves himself to be incredibly manipulative to other students and adults and highly intelligent, something he constantly reminds others of due to his arrogance and vanity. His background is mostly unknown, but he cites his parents as being one of his quote-unquote problems. And it's rumored that either Gary's father or grandfather was kicked out of Bulworth Academy and sent to prison. And that would kind of explain Gary's bad behavior and unstable personality. Now, fun fact, I've never actually played Bully, but I know a lot of people who have mentioned he's a pretty interesting antagonist, so I had to mention him in this video. Going back to the GTA franchise, we have arguably one of the greatest and most hated villains in the series, and that's Dimitri Rascalov from GTA 4. When first introduced, Dimitri was shown to be a very calm and collected individual, but nonetheless slightly aggressive. In contrast to Mikhail Faustin, Dimitri acts as the brains of their organization. Dimitri also seems to possess some sort of emotional detachment towards others, and according to Mikhail, it's due to Dimitri's overuse of painkillers. Despite having a long history with Mikhail, Dimitri showed little to no hesitation about having him killed, mostly to protect himself from Kenny Petrovic's wrath after Faustin ordered Nico to have his son murdered. Afterwards, Dimitri showed himself to be a highly untrustworthy individual, seen as he betrayed Nico and ambushed him alongside Ray Bolgren in order to form a partnership with the latter. Although Dimitri never showed signs of betraying Bolgren, as Bolgren was a heavily powerful and influential mobster, and Dimitri was possibly afraid of the consequences should he betray him, but wasn't above betraying lesser influential people such as Jimmy Pecorino. Aside from his treacherous nature, Dimitri also shows signs of hypocrisy, telling Nico that he couldn't accuse him of disloyalty, as Nico killed Mikhail and knew as much about loyalty as he did, despite Dimitri himself planning the assassination. Unlike Mikhail, Dimitri was a lot more efficient in leading their organization. While still under Mikhail's leadership, their organization only operated on a small part around Hove Beach, and they only possessed one business interest. But after Dimitri's takeover, the organization's influence and power grew drastically, seen as they began operating around Algonquin and Alderney. They gained numerous new business interests and expanded their horizons, and even influential mobsters like John Gravelli and other politicians such as Bobby Jefferson and even the mayor of Liberty City started taking notice of Dimitri's actions. Dimitri Rascalov is a true sociopath and arguably the greatest GTA antagonist and one of the greatest Rockstar antagonists, and that's why he has earned a place in this video. Taking a step back in time, we go to one of the most manipulating and corrupt officers of the Wild West, and that's Edgar Ross from Red Dead Redemption. Throughout the events of Red Dead Redemption, Ross is portrayed to epitomize the unfair and detestable nature of the corruption in the federal government during its time. He is indifferent, disloyal, and unscrupulous. This is demonstrated most when he abducted John Marston's family in order to strong-arm him into hunting the former members of the Linde gang, and then still changing the terms of their agreement in order to suit his needs. Ross advocates federalism and acknowledges the hypocrisy of his methods as necessary. He displays an end justifies the means attitude to law enforcement. Even though Ross admits the potential corruption of law enforcement, he still views himself and the agency as more justified than the outlaws they hunt, namely Dutch van der Linde. While Ross places the agency on a higher moral ground than outlaws, he himself doesn't seem to be motivated by any morally justifiable reasons. Throughout Red Dead Redemption, Ross is only concerned with achieving personal glory, and even mocks the citizens of Blackwater by calling them scum, while berating John Marston. Ross's disdain for outlaws is also shown in Red Dead Redemption 2, when he mockingly tells a 4-year-old Jack Marston to enjoy his fishing while he still can, just for the sake of it. He may also hold some prejudicial views, like calling Nastus a savage after first encountering him, and assuming that he might not speak English, even after being told that Nastus was an informant. And for an antagonist being this deceitful and manipulating, he definitely deserves a spot in this video. Now we've arrived at the latest GTA game, which is almost 11 years old. Yeah, just think about that for a second. Now, GTA 5 has multiple antagonists, but in today's video I'm only going to be focusing on Devon Weston, since he is the last protagonist you kill before the credits roll. So, Devon Weston is considerably pompous, egotistical, narcissistic, arrogant, greedy, charismatic, temperamental, and being a giant con artist, he enjoys constantly reminding the protagonist that he is far wealthier than they are. And his affluence allows him to do as he pleases. Along with that, he has a rather sadistic and cynical sense of humor, joking around and making crude jokes at others' expense. All the protagonists even agree that Devon Weston is quite a douchebag. Devon Weston has had almost everything in his life handed to him, to the point that it does not even occur to him that anyone would actually stand up to him, and when they do, he responds with temper tantrums. This can be seen in the Death Wish ending when Weston starts screaming and crying, "I never lose," after he fails to bribe Trevor into sparing his life. However, it is implied by the Death Wish ending that while Weston may have many connections, he is not well liked, even hated, at least by most of his associates and acquaintances. Since none of the protagonists ever face repercussions for their obvious role in his death, if not a convenience to the people he claimed connected to, is at least not a negative impact on their lives and businesses. He gives the appearance of living a healthy life and a clear, peaceful mindset by practicing yoga, but in reality he uses his image in a passive-aggressive stance, still looking down at others, even his assistant Molly, the only person in the game who genuinely likes Weston. However, her death does anger Weston, but only to the extent that Michael quote-unquote made a fool of him. Now, Devon is definitely far from the best GTA antagonist, but he was still annoying enough as an antagonist to earn himself a place in the video. So, yeah. Now, for the last couple of antagonists on this list, we have a double whammy for Red Dead 2 with Micah Bell and Dutch van der Linde. And although being one of the game's main antagonists, I excluded Agent Milton because I just didn't think he was that notable. Starting off with Micah Bell. Micah is considered to be wild and unpredictable, even by the van der Linde gang standards. He is said to enjoy the action in his life, going as far as shooting what Arthur claims to be half the town of Strawberry in order to reclaim his prized revolvers. In spite of his brash nature, Micah is an experienced criminal and hitman, earning him the favor of Dutch himself. Micah has a poor relationship with most of the gang members as he frequently antagonizes and bullies them. Like Arthur, Micah seems to be aware that he is an immoral person, stating that if damnation was real, he'd feel right at home there. Nevertheless, in contrast to Arthur, he has no remorse for the things he has done and doesn't make any effort to redeem himself. Over the course of the game, Micah's relationship with Arthur turns into a bitter rivalry as he exploits Dutch's paranoia when he and Arthur begin to distrust each other. The jealousy Micah has for Arthur is even evident at the end of the game if the player's honor is low and Arthur helps John to escape, where Micah exclaims that Arthur is not better than him before killing him. Micah treats everyone he meets with sadistic and psychopathic contempt, holding no moral standards whatsoever. Micah is also hostile towards John Marston, though to a slightly lesser extent than Arthur. He mocks John for playing with Jack and also teases him about being attacked by wolves several times. Without a doubt, Micah is definitely a contender for being Rockstar's greatest antagonist, and most people seem to think he is, but in my opinion, I saved the greatest for last. Honestly, there is so much to say about Dutch that he probably even deserves his own video, but I'm just gonna keep it brief and explain why I think he's the greatest Rockstar antagonist. Dutch is shown to be a merciless killer who justifies killing innocent people or lawmen as a way of combating the corruption of the federal government. Despite his brutal ways, Dutch is educated and, unlike many outlaws, genuinely believes he is committing these crimes for idealistic reasons rather than greed. His anti-government and pro-individualist idealism, combined with the natural charisma, attracted a following of people who had been downtrodden by the society they lived in. Dutch has an anarchistic worldview and seems to want a world that goes somewhere along the lines of a hunter-gatherer society, a world that opposes technology and governmental control, where one must fight to survive but may also live the lifestyle they choose. Free from any rules and regulations, a world where men live very much like they did in the old idealized Wild West. When we first meet Dutch in Red Dead 2, we see him as an ambitious and clearly capable leader, but throughout the events of the story his personality takes a toll for the worst. Now, the reason I think Dutch is the greatest antagonist is because of his nuance and moral decline. Micah is a true villain. He was evil at the beginning of the game, he was evil throughout the game, and he was evil at the end of the game. That's just who he is, and always will be. But Dutch actually had a change in personality, which is why I found him so interesting. Now, if we're purely talking about Dutch from Red Dead 1, then he probably wouldn't be the greatest, but because Red Dead 2 gives us that context and truly shows us his downfall, that's what makes Dutch van der Linde the greatest Rockstar antagonist, for me at least. But all the antagonists I mentioned in this video were good in their own way, but if you disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Take care.